Awesome. Good morning, Internet, and apologies for my horrible, raspy voice. I lost it yesterday, but the good news is that I had already planned on having my good friend and coworker Nick Rycar come on today and talk about actually show us a lot of what's going on into the new Chef 16 release that's upcoming. So you will not have to listen to this horrible voice for much longer. Nick is kind of going to steer most of the conversation today. We'll have a couple more people dropping in. Around about, I think, 30 minutes from now, Kimball from my team is going to join. So we'll have a lot more people joining. But uh, Nick, I know we've had you on before to share about Chef Infra Client before, I think, right?
I think we were doing a IAM conversation last time
Yeah, that's
around.
right.
That sounds right.
Yeah, we were talking about identity management in Chef, and so Nick is back to talk with us about Chef 16, as I said. And I know you've kind of introduced yourself, and you're pretty popular, well known amongst our audience. But if you could give us a little bit of your history with Chef, and then what you do now, so that people kind of have a frame of reference.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to move myself into another room real quick. But yes, hi, I'm Nick. Hold, please.
The wonderful thing about Zoom virtual backgrounds is that you cannot tell Nick is walking. Well, you kind of can, but oh, while he's doing that, I'll share
The
with you.
veil gets lifted from time to time. Yeah.
I'll show you what I learned about virtual backgrounds today. So I had this one up before we started like streaming live, and I discovered that if I leave the frame, my curtains in the background appear. So I came up with a magic trick to make myself disappear. And yes, since you're here at the first 3 minutes of this live stream, you get to see this ridiculousness. Everybody say abracadabra on the count of three. One, two, three. Abracadabra.
Abracadabra. Oh wait, shit!
Ta-da.
I shouldn't do that when I pull context when I talk. Uh,
Oh, so nobody even saw it.
maybe
But that's
once
perfect.
again,
I
my
really
craft ruins
disappeared.
things. uh, but I'm back.
He's
Uh,
back.
I'm
Awesome.
back. So yeah, I'm a senior technical product marketing manager here at Chef, and have been kind of a chef jack of all trades for something on a decade now. I used to be a sysadmin, came on to Chef as a solutions architect selling Chef, and now in marketing, I end up sort of building webinar content, training content, blog posts. If it's got marketing and technical in it, probably my hands are in it somewhere. And of particular note, yesterday I did an overview of the forthcoming Chef Infra Client 16, which will be released next Tuesday, the 28th. And my thoughts today, so taking advantage of the kind of informal catch as catch can nature of Twitch streaming, figured I'd kind of like give a bit of an overview of like some of the things I shared yesterday. If folks have any questions, always happy to chat and just keep things nice and loose. But with that, we'll see how well my screen share is working. And I should just go ahead and make sure there's nothing embarrassing and share my whole desktop because I'm going to be switching around windows a couple times. No one needs to see what's in my downloads. All right. So, mostly Zoom backgrounds. Shocker. But the high level like takeaway from yesterday's webinar is that this particular release of Chef Infra is really focused around making things easy. So while there's a lot of the same stuff that folks can expect from any Chef Infra release, new resources, new helper functions, performance enhancements, expanded platform support, we've also spent a lot of time focusing on sort of adoption and expansion for folks. So how do we make it easy for newcomers to use Chef? How do we make it easy for sort of folks that are expanding their Chef usage to do so? And most importantly, how do we make it easy for folks to grab our latest kit? On that last note, another thing that I want to make sure I promote off the top here is that our professional services team are running a promotion right now, wherein if you are looking to upgrade your Chef Infra client, we would love to help you and give you 25% off of a PS engagement. So that offer is going to be valid through June 30th. And I'll make sure we throw everyone, I'll give folks the link to this contact us here, where you can find the form you can fill out to get in touch with us and our PS team. Also, all of the sort of eligibility requirements for the promotion. But with that,
Awesome.
sort of, oh yeah, so
And this
anytime I talk about Chef Infra Client is a good opportunity to call out, I think, the perennial misconception that gets folks tripped up. And that is that the Chef Infra 16, we're talking specifically about the Chef Infra Client. The Chef Server has a completely different versioning scheme. So the latest release for Chef Infra Server is 13, and both 12 and 13 work with all Chef Infra Client releases since I've been at Chef, which goes back to, I think, 11 and probably further. But the real takeaway is you do not need to look for a Chef Infra Server 16. It does not exist. And your Chef Infra Server will probably work with Chef Infra Client 16. The other thing is Chef Workstation. So this is a particularly for longtime Chef users. You probably have the Chef DK. You might have Chef Workstation. Chef Workstation is intended to be a full replacement for the Chef DK. Has all of the tools that are in the development kit. And we do recommend folks use the latest version of Workstation, regardless of what your infra server client setup is. All the tooling, things like Test Kitchen, can be configured with explicit configurations for whatever version you are using. So even if you're using an older version of Infra, running the latest workstation is still the best way to go. Especially since it's going to get you all of the latest cook style rules, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. But that's going to be a good way to help you make sure your cookbooks are going to be compatible with later releases of Chef Infra. So yeah, with that, I wanted to put a finer point on some of those bullets, and to my cohorts, I am not looking at the chat right now, so if there's anything I should know about, you know the drill. Cut me
I
right off.
got your back,
Waiting
Nick.
for
I
you to
got
take
your
a breath.
back.
Yep, it is a fool's errand. I can fill up space, but yeah, like the high level takeaway here is I've been sort of talking about Chef for Client 16 in as much as really making good on the promise that your policy only needs to be as complex as the problem you need to solve, and that your policy can evolve alongside your needs even. And to that end, when I talk about ease of use, the feature that most directly relates to this is that we have launched support for YAML recipes. So it makes for an easy on ramp for creating chef policy. All of Chef's built in resources can be used in this way. And makes it so that you don't end up having to write fun things like conditionals or using helper functions until you have a problem that needs those to solve it. Part of this will also be a YAML converter to our DSL, so that if you start with YAML and you find yourself with a use case that needs some code, we do have that push button way to get you into the sort of coded language for updates. As far as ease of customization goes, this one's for all my gearheads in the audience, but we've released support for a new feature called Unified Mode. So historically, and indeed in every Chef client run, there is a bunch of things that happen. In particular, that trips up folks starting to customize Chef for the first time. There is a compile phase of execution and an execution phase. And the folks that are just writing their first bits of Ruby in Chef sometimes find that Ruby gets executed in unexpected places. So what unified mode does is it lets you opt in to a single unified execution stage where everything defined is going to operate in the order you put it, and you don't have to worry about compile time, execution, lazy mode, all sort of the stuff that we do to hack execution of our policy. And then for ease of upgrades, that's where the improvements to the aforementioned cook style come into play. Cook style has now officially supplanted Food Critic. and has all of the rules that Food Critic was alerting on and more. And since Cookstyle is based on Rubocop, it also has facilities for auto remediation of a lot of deprecations. So you can sort of get a long way with a little bit of effort in getting things done. And now I'm going to see whether my son needs my attention here. So some more migrating. But with that, I'll pause the screen share real quick and let's gab.
Problem. Oh, of course, my voice is more gone now.
It's okay, Jody. I've got your back.
So this does kind of go back to a lot of the stuff we talked about in the stream last week as well. The upgrading, like Nick, I don't know if you were able to see it, but last week I basically just read through your blog and like built the steps I would need to build in order to build out an LCR module for it. Hi, everybody. Hi, Izzy. Oh my gosh, his hair is so long. It's out of control.
Yeah, we're still stealing ourselves for trying to home cut this little guy. But hey, you want to be a TV star, bud?
Yes.
Yeah,
Make me
come join me.
famous. I'm like, no, I
Oh
don't.
yeah.
Anyway, I was saying this goes back to last week's conversation. We were talking about the different upgrade paths, why you would go through an upgrade, um, unified mode, and kind of how stuff is starting to help. Um, the like sort of overarching conceptual umbrella for all of these changes is like getting rid of technical debt or paying down technical debt. And I just, I don't like all of these features are like super exciting. And it's hard sometimes working for the software company because you see all like the small releases, the small features that are being implemented. And so it's like over time, the product has always been this wonderful, right? Well, no, people who are still using Chef Infra 12 or 13 have no idea how like how much cooler stuff is in Chef 16 now, how much easier things are, like how much the barrier to entry has been reduced. All of that stuff is just like really um nice to see in Chef 16. So
Indeed. Yeah, thank you. Now that little man has a bottle, he's in much better mood. But yeah, so like on that front, I mean, there's still, of course, the things that you expect outside of the specific ease of use, quality of life improvements we're working on. So it's smaller, it's faster. We've got a bunch of expanded platform support, particularly the flavors of Linux on ARM that are going to be part of the what is Amazon service called Graviton? They're the low cost EC2 service. So we want to make sure we support those setups. The internal Ruby has been upgraded to 2.7 and bunch of new resources for Mac OS and Windows, and sort of working with Chef Client runs scheduled as Windows tasks, cron jobs, system D services, etc. And even outside of unified mode, we've improved the facilities for custom resources. In particular, resource partials are one I'm kind of excited about, where you can define common functionality between custom resources so that you don't have to redefine the same parameters in a bunch of different places, as well as some helpers to help with resource state and execution control. And so even in like, things like Ojai, our profiling tool, we've got a bunch of new helpers that can detect specifics of platform architecture, cloud, virtualization, you name it. So all them fun toys. But yeah, it's funny.
so
When I was doing the webinar, I kind of brought things around this idea of if there is a word that Chef is most associated with, perhaps even more so than DevOps, it's code, right? We tell people, you need to be a coded enterprise. Oh, I'm regretting these animations here on the playback. And you need to have your infrastructure represented as code. And, as someone who has been a Chef user, yeah, bud, and a Chef seller, uh, that has been kind of a double-edged sword. The things that most of the people I talk to agree about are Well, the one that drives me nuts is that code is hard. I end up disagreeing, but we'll come back to that. But they'll tell me code is powerful. Like even the folks, yeah, my boy's got opinions. But yeah, even the folks that say, "Hey, it's too hard for me," will recognize that. Oh boy, this can do stuff for me that I can't do today. And then as folks start managing their policy as code, they understand it's essential. Like it's hard to go back once you've learned what that codified policy brings to your automation efforts. Uh, and so on that code is hard front, I tend to dig into this because it hasn't been my experience. And when I try to have that conversation, people, I find what they're actually saying is code is complicated. And that is something I can attack because code certainly can be complicated, but it doesn't need to be. And that's sort of, kind of where we start out here today and why the YAML recipes excite me as much as they do. And I get a little bit self-indulgent here running through my bio, but when I started using Chef, as I mentioned, I was a sysadmin at an MSP, and while I didn't have a lot of trouble getting started with Chef, I had a lot of advantages that I wasn't really aware of at the time. I worked at a place where we had high touch operation support for a ton of customers. So we did a lot more sort of ops type work for a lot of diverse types of apps and people. And we specialized in Ruby on Rails. So the Rubiness of Chef was not at all alien to me. I wrote Capistrano recipes for folks. I had to debug stack traces. So all of that was well within my wheelhouse. And anyone else who remembers the days before Chef DK, I was an old hand at running Ruby version managers. And if you can name a platform, I probably installed the Nokogiri gem on it and can share my PTSD stories with you. And of course, my colleagues were all Ruby devs, even though I wasn't a developer, and many of them ended up being Chef contributors that built a lot of the tools that live in Chef Workstation today. So I had a lot of luck, and that meant that I had a lot of success as a Chef user, but not necessarily as a Chef teacher. I learned when I came to Chef the term expertise bias, or what an old teacher of mine used to call asking a fish about water. But I didn't know the things that I knew before I started using Chef. And it meant that when I would try and get my colleagues bought in, they would say, the code is too complicated for me to do. When I realized they meant your code is too complicated for me to use. Because I didn't document, I didn't test. I wrote these crazy regular expressions that made sense to me, but God help me if I try to teach anyone.
So you built
right.
my code.
Yeah, that's. I think that's a common thing, Nick. Especially as like we know that like a lot of Chef users come from often a more developer type background, and like will know the experienced ones. People like me and what have you built up. I was a professional developer that kind of fell into sysadmining, and I have exactly the same issue. One of the things though is that like code. People often think code is complicated and what have you, but one of the reasons is because the systems that you are automating are complicated. Like you can't completely hide that. And I don't know.
And it's funny, like even when not to toot my own horn, but I feel like I was a pretty successful solutions architect. But even when I was talking to someone that wasn't willing to take the plunge, no one argued with me that like my solution was the most powerful one that they'd seen. Their concern was what it would take for them to get there. And that's why stuff like YAML recipes really excite me. So this is actually code that comes from a cookbook that we actually use in our training classes to install a web server, and it gives you sort of an introduction to 3 of the most common resources you'll use in Chef: package, template, and service. And the thing that's interesting to note here is that for simple use cases, even in our quote unquote coded domain specific language, the syntax isn't particularly complicated. I tell the system what I want to do and potentially set any parameters to specify in greater detail what I want to do. But these are order-based declarative resources at the end of the day. Because of that, I can also represent them on the right-hand side here now as YAML. And this is exactly the same code here. We have a resources hash with the different types of resources we have. The hashes, arrays, and symbols are using YAML syntactic conventions, except instead of the Ruby syntactic conventions that we borrow in our DSL. But the functionality of these two things is identical.
So,
Now,
Nick, can I
yeah,
pause? So basically what you're saying is to create a recipe in YAML, it's it's just going to be like key value pairs of the same parameters that are in your recipe. So if you understand the parameters that make up a resource in a recipe, you'll be able to build it in YAML basically just the same.
exactly. So our
Oh,
full DSL or our full list of resources is available here. And per our docs, they each have sort of the parameters that can be set optionally and sort of their default values. So at a high level, what we see up top with the package resource is if I define absolutely nothing, it's just going to use our defaults, which in the case of package is an install. And if I need to be more specific, I can do, hey, bud, we're over here if you want to party, bud. He has other thoughts.
he's really excited about this YAML integration, you guys. He's like, but I love Ruby. I want to stick with Ruby.
I hear you, bud. And the good news is you can. Oh, no, but don't request permissions from the meeting host. That's my job. But so yeah, the notes here as far as limitations go is that this is just going to be static execution of Chef resources. So things like, even using attributes, using the helper functions like, include recipe, platform, things like that. That's all going to require the DSL. That said, we'll be shipping it with a YAML to DSL converter so that if your use case evolves beyond what you can achieve in YAML, you don't need to start over. You can just go ahead, convert to DSL and start banging away. So for an example, and I love the Apache use case here because anyone who's had to administer Apache knows that our resources are platform independent. That code isn't, because Apache is called Apache 2 on Ubuntu and HTTPD in Red Hat and CentOS. So one of the things you can do with the DSL are things like conditional statements. Here we have an example where if I needed to add platform detection, I could go ahead and add that case statement, and now I have a reason to go to the DSL. But the key thing here is that if I don't have any specific need beyond that, I can stay in YAML and have a very low barrier to entry.
Do you see, sorry, do you see in the future people kind of managing these like YAML YAML recipes side by side with the RB recipes that kind of expand on them? Or like,
Yeah.
I think what my question is like, what is the upgrade path between YAML, or how do you clean it up after if you do convert into a Ruby recipe
Yeah.
versus a YAML recipe?
Well, the nice thing is, like, if all you're looking for is the same functionality, my understanding is you don't need to do any cleanup. It would essentially just do sort of the opposite of what we see here, and turn what you see on the right to what we see on the left. That said, as far as I've been, like, they can sort of live together in harmony as long as, wow,
Uh-oh.
bud, wow. He was completely quiet while you were talking, for what it's worth. So he's
He
got
loves my
impeccable
raspy
comedic
voice.
timing. Yeah, come here, you. Oh. But I think the key thing being here, like, I might say use a default.rb to include recipes, and then a YAML recipe within my run list to do the things. So I could see definitely a lot of hybrid opportunities. I
Yeah.
think where I expect to see this the most is in sort of teaching. Like, I expect most use cases will eventually get to the point where you're going to need to have some kind of code. The difference here is that it becomes an intentional decision. Now I am putting that code in because there's a specific problem I need to solve. And I don't know about you, but for me, that helps motivate me to learn things that I don't know if I have at least a very specific job that needs to be done.
Yeah, for sure. Cool.
Oh, little guy. He can't decide whether he's really happy or really upset. Oh, that was,
I have days like that too.
I think he decided. So, all right. Another brief pause while we change scenery.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe while we do that, Kimball, I'm gonna throw you on the spot. Um,
Yeah.
I'm excited that you're on the stream today because our team has been undergoing a like what is it now, 7-month process.
Oh, it's something like that.
Like,
Yeah, it's
almost, we're getting close to a year. We've been going through this process of trying to upgrade the platform that learn.chef.io is built on, and Kimball is the project leader for that. And Kimball, maybe if you wouldn't mind sharing something like you're excited about in this new platform, and like what your roadmap looks like, maybe.
so what it's wonderful. So we're basically what we've decided to do is a little bit of history. We launched the Learn Chef Rally platform about 3 years ago, and we built it out as a custom built development platform, which for at the time that we did it was absolutely like what we needed. It gave us like flexibility we never had before. It was really easy for us to create content. It was all written in Markdown and what have you. And at the time, it was fantastic. But over the last 3 years, we've had a lot of problems. The company that developed it for us got swallowed up into a larger company, and it became very difficult for us to get updates. So we've had problems with that. We've like out of date libraries on the way it was built, and so it's caused a lot of problem. And so what we decided to do was, instead of having a custom platform, we would do something that was a much more standard learning environment. The world of learning environments has progressed massively in the last 3 years. It's been really quite incredible. I was at the Learning Technology show a few months ago, and I was just amazed at how many even platforms I didn't even know existed that were there, and it's such an incredible situation. But we've decided to build with a partner using the worldly renowned Open edX platform. This is I don't know if you remember a few years ago, MIT and a few other of the university. A few of the other universities set up this amazing thing called the massively online training system on MOOC, massively online classroom, and they built this platform called edX, and they then open source that platform when we're building it. And by using this online learning platform, and right now is the great time for an online learning platform, with people being in the situation where they just can't get together for training. We are building out this new platform, which will allow us to author the content much more quickly. We've not got a situation where we have to wait for 40 minutes for the build to compile, so that we can release as I did a few days ago, a 4-character change to the platform, to the content. And we'll be able to release things really quickly and in a much more modern manner. But the thing that really gets me excited about this platform is, as well as this amazing online situation that we've got, we've also are having a platform. Say the partner we're working is an amazing company called Appsembler, and they have what they call the Appsembler virtual labs, which allows us to build out into the training material. We will have Docker containers with our software set up that you can access through the browser, so you'll be able to get going straight away with our platform, and use all the software, be able to get hands-on using Chef Infra, using Chef Habitat, without having to install it all on your local machine. So no matter how you're wanting to like learn, play around, whether it's in a work environment where you've got restrictions on your system, or whether you just don't want to contaminate your home computer with it, you'll have the ability to do this all online. And it's been absolutely brilliant working with them. Now, I don't have anything to demonstrate yet. If you invite me back in a couple of weeks' time, then I will have something to demonstrate, and I'll definitely look forward to that. But it's been brilliant. It really has been amazing. Yeah. Yes, absolutely, like an amazing vendor to work with.
Cool.
But yeah, I really wish I could show it to you, but it's like we're still like trying to figure out the theming and the branding, and we don't want to like show something particular like half baked, and I haven't set up any of the virtual lab stuff yet. So
One of the things that I was working on, I did not get done before today, but will be ready for next week, is a survey that I'd like to share with anybody who's watching. I would love if you would go through it. But the survey's goal is to essentially um, determine what people's preferred learning paths are and what kind of encourages them or motivates them to continue completing tutorials and stuff. So, if anybody out there has ideas around that, our team is like very we are very committed to building a platform that is valuable to you, and that actually does what you need it to do. So your feedback in us building that would be amazing. And I did get word from Nick that it was a diaper change for the boy, so he might be just one more minute. In the meantime, I'll say, if you've been watching over the last few weeks, um, you will you will be familiar with the character Unipug, who it's a little dog in a unicorn outfit. He got adopted last week by one of our viewers, Alan. And so this week I have packed him up into a quarantine crate. And he's sitting in my office in quarantine for the next 2 weeks until I can mail him to Alan. And this box is amazing, so I gotta show you it. Ooh, you can hear all the movement. It is the question mark box from Super Mario Brothers. I considered like drilling holes in the top, little air holes, and then I thought maybe the US Postal Service might not like that much. So I refrained, but at least I got a really cool quarantine box to go in.
That's awesome, Jody.
And now that Nick is back, I have one more thing to say. I'm promoting this without Garth's approval, my executive producer. I am going to try and host an Animal Crossing event on my island. So anyone who's interested in that, follow me on Twitter, and I will give you a dodo code to join me on my island. Now, I wouldn't just offer a dodo code without some sort of perk or benefit for you coming to my island. So I have enlisted my if if he cannot do it, then I will look for my graphics team to maybe help. But Nick Rycar himself has agreed to help design a chef logo for Animal Crossing. So if you come to my island, I'll give you a free chef branded item in Animal Crossing. And with
Can't be
that,
that much harder than a Street Fighter character profile. So
oh
why the
my
heck
gosh,
not?
I love
That's
your
very cool.
Street Fighter hopscotch.
My Minecraft skin for a very long time has been a chef hoodie as well. So
Nice. So coming at you live from my son's room now. He has plenty of toys to keep him occupied. So we'll see how long that holds. Yeah, bud. But yeah, you can join the party. That's totally cool. So there he is. On the other side of a diaper change, Hale and Hardy.
I love that he has sleeve tattoos.
He does. This is a
He's
good
a
present
real
he got
rocker.
from one of his aunties. But
Cute.
at any rate, where was I here? I only showed one of my 3 fancy pants things. I got 2 extra fancy pants things to show. One of which is again that, and I think we talked a little bit about this before, but this was really like, if I didn't hit any hurdles like with my early stage, this is when I hit my learning curve, was when I started trying to customize chef code. I was a solutions architect and chef in 2014. I worked specifically with sort of our mid-market accounts. So I was unique among SAs, as was Jody when she was on my team, in that we did a lot of low depth, high volume conversations. So we got a lot of practice practicing our pitches and hearing all kinds of the ways people were using our kit. It led to some really cool wins. Around the time I started at Chef was when we had nascent PowerShell support. That's right, Windows stuff is. And we had a team that had essentially just taken all of their existing PowerShell runbooks and added guards, which is a chef feature that lets you determine a condition for when a particular script or function should or shouldn't execute. So they were actually pretty self-deprecating about it. They're like, we didn't really use any chef resources. I know that we can refactor this, but at the end of the day, like, they had something they didn't have before, which was idempotence. They had the ability to rerun their script, even if something had happened and it broke halfway through a previous run, with the confidence that it was only going to change things that needed changing, and the things that were in their desired state could stay where they were. So that was a really kind of cool early learning experience where, realizing that, there were certainly places for them to go. A lot of their PowerShell scripts that were, 10 lines of PowerShell could be a single chef resource, say, but they had a specific goal they were looking for, and they figured out how to use our solution to get there. Now, as that happens and you start learning all of the power that's inside a chef's kit, one of the training slides that's in our docs as well that can be scary is what's actually happening under the hood of a Chef Infra Client run. And most of the time, you don't really have to care about this until you do. And when you start, say, using Ruby to augment Chef, say you're writing custom resources and making use of all those, that cool mature language that we have access to, you learn that, hey, there's this compile phase that does everything before even my first resource is executed. And that Ruby code I wrote didn't happen where I expected it to happen. And so this is exactly where that unified mode comes into place, where if we're creating a custom resource and we want to mix Chef's domain-specific language with the Ruby that we have access to, we have the ability to opt into a single phase of execution. So that instead of a separate compile and execute phase, everything just get executed in the order we wrote it. All we need to do to add that is inside your custom resource, add the line unified mode true, piece of cake. Have had some real fun success stories talking to customers who are early adopters here, where they were just starting to hit this learning curve. And in a couple of cases, folks said, I started playing with lazy evaluation, but then my rep told me about unified mode and that just worked. And I moved on to the next thing. And there's no story I like to hear better than I didn't have to worry about this anymore. So that makes me happy. And this is, again, a PSA for folks. When you copy things out of animated slides into title slides, check and see if you remove the animation. But then there's the code is essential, which you'd think would be a blanket good thing for me, but it's kind of a double-edged sword. And Jody, I think you were talking about this a little bit at the beginning of the call, but like, my blind spot now, it used to be that like I didn't understand that I knew Ruby things that other people didn't know. Now it's that my prod is probably more fun than your prod, because my prod is broken by design, so I can educate people on how to fix it. I have very little sensitive data, and I always get to run the latest and greatest. So it's been a long time since I had to upgrade anything. And indeed, the essential nature of that chef policy to a lot of our customers became a double-edged sword, where we had this implemented, it became a crucial part of our day-to-day life. But now I'm stuck on an old version because I'm worried that if I upgrade, I might have to spend X number of hours updating my chef code, and I have no idea what that's going to look like. And so we took a hard look at what our tooling was and where we could make it easier for folks to plan for and approach those upgrades. And in particular, I want to spend some time talking about Cook Style and Test Kitchen. I mentioned earlier that even if you're running older versions of Chef Infra, that having the latest Chef workstation is crucial because it gives you these two tools. And now both Cook Style and Test Kitchen have facilities for you to target specific Chef versions. So even if you're not trying to get to 16 or anything specific, you can tie it to 12, 13, 14, whatever you're using as you're testing things out. In particular, Cook Style is going to give us a way to evaluate and in many cases auto-correct deprecations that have happened over the years. So for an example here, in Chef 14, the chocolatey package resource had a bit of a change. There used to be an action called remove to get rid of a package, which changed to uninstall. So this can be something that would definitely trip folks up. And if I have it in a bunch of cookbooks, just figuring out where I'm impacted could be a fun fact-finding expedition. Cook Style can tell me where that stuff lives, and if I pass it that -A flag, will even auto-correct it for me.
We talked
And
about
that's
this.
actually a good sort of stopping point. Yeah, what's up there, Jody?
We talked about this a little last week. Sorry. But I do have a question
Yeah.
around like I I think we pointed cook style at an entire repo last week. Will it go through and indicate which cookbook the recipe lives in? Or is it just from the recipe level?
I believe it will. So it'll actually tell you here, it's giving me the relative path of where it
Yeah.
found the issues. So I am writing it. I think when I did it to dot, but I was just sitting in a single cookbook. You can, however, do it to a full repo and it will
Yeah.
give you the repo wide data. And actually, one of the helpful things to do in that scenario is you can go ahead and run a, oh, wait, actually, let me undo the auto fixes that I did the last time around. This is another one of the advantages of having a real fun prod is I can run scary git commands like that willy-nilly all the time. But so if I do a cook style here, I have a little dummy cookbook that's just full of outdated stuff. So it doesn't really do much of anything other than have examples of things that don't work anymore. And I can do some different options. So if I did format offenses, it'll just give me that high level summary of how many of each type of deprecation was encountered. There are a few different formats. In the sort of default, you see all of the details, including where they were found and sort of what the nature of things were. Another cool thing is that it's actually integrated, with Visual Studio Code in the Chef Infra plugin. So if I open this up in my text editor, I know, Izzy, you'll actually see all of those things I got warnings about in
Oh,
line.
that is cool.
Yeah, they show up right in here. And it will even respect, and here's an interesting thing, right? A lot of the time, like folks will ask me, I'm on like Chef Infra 12. Should I just go straight to 16 or do I need to do anything in between? And the answer is the one everyone hates hearing me say, it depends. So in some cases, like especially like, you take a look at that Apache cookbook that I showed you before, it'll work in 12, it'll work in 16. There's nothing fancy about it. And sometimes that'll be the case. If you're concerned, we do recommend upgrading through the major releases. So hit the last minor release of each major release. And we've made sure that our tooling helps facilitate this. So if you take a look at my rubocop.yaml here, I actually have a target chef version parameter set where it's only showing me deprecations through Chef Infra Client 12. If I go ahead and comment this out and reload things, I believe I'll see a bunch more, and a lot of them will come in this rewind, I believe. Come on, plug in. So, oh, it helps if you save the file too. And then you reload. I did this on the webinar too, so I do not learn from my mistakes. Hey, there we go. My rewind recipe is my canary in the coal mine there, because there are a few things here that don't break until after Chef 12. So with that parameter turned off, I can see that cook style is finding a bunch more things to fix for me. So I have the ability to sort of kind of control the fire hose here and target specific versions and constrain what I'm told. But we also can go ahead and run that same sort of cook style command with a -A, and it's going to go ahead and auto correct anything that it can. So you'll see that corrected next to each of these. In the case where it doesn't correct it, you'll probably get a good indication of why. So for example here, this node normal, the advice that's being given is to use default override, force default, or force override. Well, there's 4 options. Which do I pick? In this case, it's letting me make that determination rather than trying to make one for me. But if there's a simple case of like, well, this parameter is called something else now, well, that's pretty easy. I can just auto fix that. We had 14 offenses detected, 11 of them were able to be auto corrected. And hey, at this point, I can go ahead and just run git diff and get a nice roadmap of all the things that were either deprecations or anti-patterns in my cookbook that this cook style run went ahead and fixed for me. That's right. And when it comes to doing functional testing of all that, that's where something like Test Kitchen comes in. So I have another cookbook here. That's right. It's YAML. I know the YAML makes you angry, but here we see that Apache recipe that we showed off in the slide deck. This sound is usually reserved for when he sees a cat, so he must really like y'all, because that's a sign of great affection from him. At any rate, here, it's worth noting that in Test Kitchen, which is a testing harness for Chef Code, we have that same ability to target specific chef versions. In this case, I'm doing it in the entirely other direction because Chef 16 doesn't get released until next week, and I need to test my YAML cookbook. So I'm able to point Test Kitchen at the current channel, which will get me my pre-release versions, and I'm just grabbing the latest version of the release. You can specify it explicitly as well. You can see sort of the Chef 15 example given below here. And the Chef 0 provisioner, if you're not familiar with it, is just running Chef Infra Client such that it doesn't need to talk to a Chef Infra server. So everything can be local here. Other than that, we're just going to run it on CentOS 7. And if I do a kitchen converge, nothing is up my sleeve. Those resources are going to look, well, exactly what they look like if I had written them in the Chef DSL. So I did pre-warm my instance here, so we don't have to wait for it to provision. But I haven't actually done anything to it yet, so Chef should take some action. So again, metadata looks valid. It's going to run through my default.yaml that's in the run list. Hey, hey, hey. All right. Infra Client is installed. We can confirm that it is Infra Client 16. Excellent. And now what's Apache YAML going to do for me? It's going to go ahead and install a package, write a template file, and start a service. And when all is said and done, I should be able to hop onto that box and see a website running. So if I do a kitchen login, that's right. We're going to curl localhost, buddy. Yeah. Localhost. Yeah. And indeed. And this is actually a call out to, I think, something you mentioned earlier, which is, well, I can't use my attributes within that recipe. I am using them in my template. And so if you look at the actual index.html template we're using here, it's going and grabbing the platform host name, memory total, and CPU megahertz from OHI data that gets populated in the Chef client run. So it's only within the context of the recipe itself where I have to keep things static. When it's referencing things like my templates, I can use the full power of our templating language and all of the attributes or OHI automatic attributes that are available to me.
I have a question about defaults.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. If you name both your recipes the same thing, and you tell Chef to run the name of that recipe, will it default to Ruby or YAML?
I don't know this definitively. In my cursory testing, it looks like the RB file won if I had both, but I have not dove down to see if that's sort of something specific to the way I did it or something that's inherent to the process. Oh, he's not hugging me. He's just climbing over me. It's less affectionate than it looks. That was super cute.
I love his legs coming in at the end.
He is a climber and a thrill seeker. Yeah. I'm basically just sort of laying the baby proofing train tracks as he comes barreling down at this point.
Nice. It looks like Jim DeGriz wrote the RB to win over YAML.
I love it when there's people here who know things I don't know. Excellent. So cool, yeah. So it sounds like that is the intended behavior and not just a byproduct of how I did things. So that's cool. The only caveat when I was testing things out was that the previous release of the Chef CLI does not know that YAML is a valid extension for a recipe. Strangely, the hardest thing before I had the pre-release of the CLI to work with was just getting my policy file locked. Thankfully, next week, this shouldn't be a problem for anybody, but for me at least, the jury-rigged way I did it was I just touched an empty default.rb so that the policy lock would get generated and nuked it. And Test Kitchen don't care. It just hopes that I have the lock and will try to create it if I don't. So that was nice and easy. And I've talked to my folks that run the effortless side of the house, and they're confident that there won't be any gumming up of the effortless pattern in this. So it should be pretty straightforward to integrate however you use the Chef Infra Client today. Let's see here. Did I have? I had a little summary slide up here that we threw up at the end, but kind of again, sort of the takeaways. We want to make things easier to use than ever, smaller, faster, new resources, new platforms. Write your recipes in YAML. Use unified mode to extend and customize things more easily, and upgrade your legacy cookbooks easily with Cook Style and Test Kitchen. And if you need help beyond that, that's what we're here for. I did say I was going to give you that link, so let me go ahead and do that before I make a liar out of myself. And we're working on new LCR content around a lot of this stuff. So I'm talking with Jody and Kimball and all your favorite LCR friends to get that up and running. And we'll also have some more details as we get close to the forthcoming Chef Conf online. So we have gone digital for Chef Conf this year, probably not a surprise to folks. And we'll keep y'all posted with sort of details on how that's going to roll. There's definitely going to be some launches that I think will have some fun augmentation to this story, but I don't want to take the fun out of announcements I get to make in June. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about what my cookbooks are going to start looking like.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I wanted to point out, if you're not in the chat, Lamont is one of the people, well, is the person who wrote most of these updates, or a lot of these updates anyway. And
who
he's
answers my questions when I come in to ask, how do I do a chef?
exactly. So please, if you have any questions about what's going into Chef 16, post them. We'll try to answer them. But if we can't, the person who literally wrote it can. So, so yeah. And hopefully, as Chef Conf Digital approaches, we're going to be using this live stream to sort of next Friday, we're going to release a guidebook that kind of leads you through how to interact with Chef Conf Digital this year. The following weeks, we're going to have sort of Chef Confy themed streams here at Twitch. So come back so you can actually talk to the engineers who are writing all of the stuff that we're announcing, all the cool things we're showing off. We're going to try and have a lot of the engineers come on. We're going to, like I said last week, we're working with the sous chefs to have everybody share everything that they're working on here as well. So, and yeah, Mandy, it's going to be crazy. I lost my voice yesterday, not even doing Chef Conf, but I tend to lose my voice every year at Chef Conf somehow. I think this digital year is going to be the same. It's going to be pretty awesome. So, and we have a lot of really cool stuff planned that I don't think a lot of this stuff would have been the same. I know it wouldn't have been the same, but I don't think some of this stuff would have been possible in like a live. Will, that is 100% correct. Somehow I lost my voice. It's always karaoke every year. Anyway, um, um, I totally lost my train of thought, but yes, join us over the next few weeks as we get you prepped for June 2nd, which is Digital Chef Conf. Oh, that's what I was saying. We're going to have a bunch of engineers and sous chefs join us. So you'll get to hear from the people who wrote it. You'll get to hear from people using it. We're going to have a few of our awesome partners and customers come on and talk about how they have implemented Chef with other tools like ServiceNow. We're going to have Habitat Week. It's going to be really awesome. So at the very least, join us next Friday at 11 so that you can get the guidebook or the playbook for Chef Conf Digital in the month of May and following or leading up to June 2nd. Okay, so if I didn't completely lose my voice there, it's over the weekend, it should be completely gone.
Yeah. Well, and like, we did our part to like just sabotage you as much as possible. Like when you still had some of a voice before this call, and we just talked about Animal Crossing and Pokemon for half an hour just to make sure you didn't have any voice left when we got here. Uh, well,
That's
and before I forget, I think I teased this yesterday as well, but we'll be working on a blog series as well between now and Chef Comp on getting a bit more fine grained on upgrades and lots of tips and tricks for upgrade strategies, more in depth on cook style, some talk about updating the client itself with the Chef Client Updater cookbook. So stay tuned for all that.
cool. Well, cool. Do you have anything else cool to share with us, Nick?
I mean, that's the broad strokes. Although I'm always happy to riff or go off onto tangents. I think sort of the next thing on my docket outside of various calls like this and press briefing, I think there's a virtual chef meetup happening next week, which is going to be more of this sort of getting the word out on Chef 16. So I'll be running through the similar talk track there, and then sort of. Look for my byline on a bunch of blogs, but I don't have any other specific video content teed up.
Nice. Well, let me ask you then, what code stuff are you working on right now? Like, I know you've just finished up preparing for webinar in this, but are you working on any other environments or any demos that are upcoming?
I've always got my finger in a few pots, and so last time I joined, we talked a bit about the IAM capabilities in Chef Automate. So I've been working on, getting all of that updated in our demo environments.
Nice.
I've also been working on getting some tools out for some of our folks on. I mentioned the effortless pattern, which, if anyone who's joined the call isn't familiar, it's sort of a new way of running the Chef Infra Client, where we package up the client and your policy and your tunables into a habitat artifact for sort of easy deployment execution. Quick plug, there are some great LCR modules for the effortless pattern if you want to get up and running. But I've been using it to sort of do modified versions of some old demos we put together. So if you've heard my cheery voice in the past, you've probably heard some form of a DCA or detect, correct, automate conversation. And so I've been putting together some materials doing that with our newer kit, making use of some of the cooler new features in Chef Inspec, like the ability to set waivers for controls that you don't want to completely remove from your profiles, but that you want to intentionally skip for some reason or another. And I've also been working on sort of some good reference pipeline examples. I've been teaching myself a lot of Jenkins in the past few months and working on different fun and fancy ways to promote habitat artifacts in different like canary and blue green type environments, which has been a lot of fun to play around with.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing, Nick. I'm yeah. Like,
Oh yeah.
and one of the, just remember, like not long ago, I mentioned how one of the things we're doing with Learn Chef is making it easier for people to contribute content. So we definitely think that like we should work together and get some sort of content for the.
Absolutely. And actually, I owe y'all a thank you because part of the reason I was as successful as I was is I found the Jenkins habitat package that y'all had published in the trading repos, which had the facilities for me just doing my extensions and plugins as TOML parameters, as well as things like my license key and auth tokens. So I didn't need to figure out how to automate credentials because y'all had done that for me. So I was a happy camper.
Nice.
So
I will.
if folks are curious, it's based on the. I don't know if that one is on the depot. I know the Indeliant Jenkins package is on the repo, which is sort of the basis for that, where it's good call out to some of the habitat use cases where, while Chef Habitat can build applications completely from source, this is actually an example where we take the pre-built WAR files that Jenkins produces and just don't worry about the build phase. Now we just worry about the runtime configuration. So things like managing Jenkins plugins and adding credentials have been added into the habitat functionality. So as someone who hasn't had to install Jenkins before, this guy, it made the learning curve much, much easier than it might have otherwise been.
Sorry.
That's a funny thing. I was noticing as it's getting darker in here in London, the green screen effect was getting worse and worse because the color of my green screen has changed.
That's hilarious. I want to point out that Mandy just posted in the chat as well. Yesterday we had, sorry, not yesterday, earlier this week we had a digital online chef meetup, and Mindy Bedelman talked about pipelines in that, and the link to the YouTube video is in the chat now. So you can feel free to go through that. Well, I think unless, let's see, let me bring up, sorry, unless Nick or Kimball has anything else they want to share, I will, I will give you all sweet relief from hearing my raspy voice, and I'll give my voice some sweet relief. And we're gonna end the stream a little bit earlier than usual this week, just because I can't speak. So we are. I'm going to we're going to raid another channel, which means essentially everybody who's in this channel, we're going to start streaming. We are going to stream one of our other awesome coworkers. His name's David Echo, and he's been streaming. He does a lot of streaming on Twitch under the handle Echo Hack. You'll see him in the chat here. Um, Lately he's been doing a cool stream which I'm a gamer already, so he's playing Diablo 3. But what I think is really cool about his stream is that he talks about the different tools and techniques that he's using to stream during the stream. He also talks about the different computer and hardware components that he has in his system that will help eliminate different bugs that you might see in the game, or that just help run your processes faster. So that's a little bit of an explanation, but yeah, so we're going to sign off now. If you're interested, follow Echo Hack and watch his stuff. He does also stream code and stuff. Uh, um, I'm not sure exactly what his schedule is outside of Fridays, because that's the only day I pay attention to right now. Um, but but yeah, he's pretty prolific. So check him out, and we will see you at 11 a.m. Pacific time next Friday, and we will have an awesome Chef Conf guidebook to kick us off and get us ready to go through May. So thank you, Kimball, for sharing the Learn Chef updates. Thank you, Nick, for sharing Izzy and all the Chef 16 updates. And I will chat with you guys next week.